Hi everyone, it's Michelle Lamb. This is Jackie Kirk with BU Cares' podcast, Leaning In and Speaking Out. And today we're talking about concussion in sport, which isn't a topic that I know a whole lot about. So I think I'll learn a lot in this conversation.
So I think my connection maybe is through work at school. And
because you taught a lot of hockey players, right?
I taught a lot of hockey players, but I just taught in a small town high school as well, and I was the principal, where we had lots of students that when things went wrong, they came in, and we always worried about concussion, but I don't think we knew enough about it. And so I think we would have done a better job with them.
Yeah. I think things have changed too. I think we'll hear about that.
Yeah, I think so. I think with all things, I think science is moving us forward.
Yeah.
But I think in rural communities, we were more likely to take that stance of, you're okay.
Take it off.
Yep, stand up, brush yourself off, you're going to be fine. Get out there.
Did you ever have kids or students who felt like they didn't want to tell, like there would be repercussions, they wouldn't be able to play as much? Or did you ever have things like that where you suspected they might have a concussion, but you weren't?
No, I don't think I had that experience. We had some bad experiences with people falling, actually. I remember a track and field accident where somebody had a really bad fall.
Yeah.
And I remember waiting for the ambulance to come and being terrified. I'm looking forward to the discussion today with Shad and Bailey, and they're going to tell us some of the new research, I think, and tell us more about concussions and how teachers and parents and community members can support kids.
Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you for being here with us. My name is Michelle Lamb. I'm the director of BU Cares and one of the co-hosts of the podcast. Dr. Jackie Kirk is my other co-host. And I wonder if you could each take a minute just to introduce yourself. Bailey, you want to go ahead?
Sure. My name is Bailey Plashinsky, and I'm a teacher at Rivers Collegiate. I also coach, I'm assistant coach of the BU women's soccer team here in Brandon.
Awesome.
Hello, and I'm Shad Ricky. I'm the athletic therapist here at Brandon University and also teach in the Department of Physical Education Studies.
Awesome. So we're talking today about concussion in sport or sports, could be either. And I've heard the phrase thrown around, return to learn, and actually don't really know what that means. So I wonder if we could start there. What does that mean? Why is that important?
Sure.
Yeah,
In most cases, people understand concussion as, we can even briefly define that. So concussion is any altercation of the mind. It's actually gone a very vague definition just because of the fact, due to impact of some sort. And it's really changed its definition over the last, I'd say, 15, 20 years. And most people would understand, both of us are in an athletic kind of background, that are your guests here today, would understand how we would perform return to sport post-concussion. And from that, the world experts have started to, I'd say the last 10, 12 years, started to discuss, especially with youth age group between 5 and 19 is what they define that, as a return to learn. Because there's two parts to returning from a concussion. There's the part where the actual physical activity returning, but there's also going back to school, as most people in that age group are doing some sort of education. Is there a better way? And there is a better way to return post-concussion to those activities. One of the reasons why Bailey's here with us today is not only is she an educator, but she's also been an athlete before and has had issues with concussion. We can be honest about that. And I'm sure she could elaborate what it was like to try to go through school with those kinds of issues. And I think that'd be a good topic for you to discuss too.
Yeah, when I was in high school, hockey was my main sport. And there were, in a couple of years there, I had one concussion. And at that point, they weren't really aware of what symptoms of concussion were. You had a headache, neck tightness, nausea, and you would just keep going. So I remember I went to a chiropractor and yeah, no, you have a concussion. So at that point, it was only like taking, a week off, whatever. And so I went back and again, just felt off, but the focus and the information just, I don't think was there as it is now. So I was actually captain for the Parkland team and I played for the Chiefs, and I was looking at universities and looking that way in that direction with sport. I remember at one tournament, I came back to play and I got hit, and it wasn't even a serious hit, but I just remember it was after a goal. I just remember feeling almost that my body wasn't really connected to my mind. So, and it was frustrating as a captain, right? You didn't want to pack it in. The information wasn't there. And as a teen, that was my identity, right? So within that, I kept playing, and I think the frustration and the stress of knowing there's scouts in the stands, like, how do I do this, right? And the puck would be passed and my stick just wouldn't hit the ice in time. And I couldn't do that. It was so frustrating. And so in all that, I can see Shads, but I was looking at going back to school, and so doctors at that point said, this is number 4, 5, whatever that was, pending, because it was just continuation. And you need to pack it in. So at that point, even a return to learn, I took some time off. I found that sounds and lighting really bugged me. The processing speed too, and even just remembering what I was learning was really tough. Moving down the hallways, my friends would talk to me and I couldn't hear because the lights were almost too much. I know those are 2 different sensory systems, but it was just like almost an overstimulation. I was irritable. I was, of course, very sad. I gave up the sport that I saw a future in. I had great teachers in Rossburn Collegiate, and they were really good to me in that sense. So I would do half days and I would just chip away as much as I could. But again, I think with the lack of information, it was just frustrating because I would have to read something and I couldn't remember, I have to read it again. Studying took longer. And in that, again, I was known as an athlete. So I was like, well, what's plan B and C? So I looked at volleyball, I looked at soccer. And so in that, even through university, and that ended up having to redirect again because of more concussions. But even through university, I found the processing speed and the workload was really tough whilst also trying to be a student athlete. So I think the return to learn, it takes years. So even I find, depending on the severity of a concussion, it took me years. I was never unconscious. I never really threw up, but it was still fairly serious. And I even know the students that I work with, there's a couple of them that even 3 years later, one of them has come to me and said, I still get these headaches, I'm irritable. But it's also the social factor, right, that's affected, especially when you're in school. So the return to learn, I think, again, it comes in waves too of recovery. I don't know, and Shad probably have more to say about that, but yeah, I find that you're exhausted. I think your whole body is affected in some form too. I felt like I had inflammation in other spots just in that, and that's exhaustion, right? Everything kind of contributes. So yeah, return to learn, the processing speed, the amount of workload you can handle, just all the stimulation in the environment. It's just a lot for anyone, I think.
Yeah. So Bailey has told us lots of the different symptoms of concussions. When it comes to concussions, what are the main concerns?
The biggest concern you have is that I've seen is what do you do? And there's lots of information in online or from reputable sources that will tell you that not a lot of people know what to do. And it's not, she mentioned the word frustrating, but it's actually scary because we wonder if there's going to be an end to it. And it is a process to get through, and it's important, especially I'd say the first 7 to 10 days is really important how things are managed, such that you don't create a bigger problem longer term. Now, she had multiple concussions. That's one thing. Even the first one can be handled in an appropriate way such that the next ones, if they do happen, or you can recover from them. Fear, concern, where do we go? Who do we speak to? What can we do? Those are all certainly concerns. However, there's way more information now available for people. And I think we're turning the corner a little bit. I think she would attest to the fact there's way more information now that she's a coach and having somebody like me on staff. We talk about these things all the time. And there are people and resources available. And I hope we can enlighten that with this podcast today.
We can put some links underneath
Sure.
too, like if there are specific resources. Let's do that. So you talked about the increase in information that's coming. Are there other changes in research around concussions, different ways of dealing with them?
Funny you
like
should
that?
say. I'm actually going to a conference in 2 days in Denver. So every 4 years, the world experts in sport concussion research get together and do a consensus statement and come up with guidelines for recovery. And the sixth one is going to be coming out. Actually, the meeting was in October in Amsterdam. They never meet in places like Zurich or Osborne. They're in Amsterdam. And yeah, it's 3 solid days of research, and then they all collaborate on one giant position statement on it that basically becomes the world standard, the gold standard. As an aside, if we have student athletes here at BU that suffer concussions, I actually include that article when I do accommodations with the professors, like for class, timely. And yeah, the research that's changing is that we're breaking down. I'd say it was 8 years ago they broke it down into the learning, which we're talking about today, and the activity. Learning always comes before returning to learn, always comes before returning to activity, because it tends to be the issue that's the lingering problem. Other research is how to actually best manifest active recovery. In the old days, we just sent people in dark rooms and made them sit there, and that in the psychology of that alone is problematic, especially in an athletic kind of situation. You tend to not want to be by yourself. You want to be in a team. That's why we do these sports. So that is definitely one change, is that there is an active recovery and be evident soon when they come up with this, what's called the SCAT-6, which is a sport concussion assessment tool. And this is the 6th iteration that's coming out. So it'll be really exciting to I'm looking forward to it. I have no idea what it's going to be. I know there's 2 parts to it. They float stuff to us every once in a while, but I'm literally going to learn in 3 sleeps what the new protocols are going to be, and hopefully disseminate that to the Westman region. So
That's great. This is good timing.
yeah, it is.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Probably about a month ago, I have a great nephew who plays school. He's in grade 11, and he was screened on a shot and took one right in the top of the forehead and got a concussion. What is it that his parents should know, or that the coaches or teachers should know about concussions to be able to respond?
Biggest token of information I can send out here is, although he suffered an impact, you don't have to actually hit your head to get a concussion. You can get the shearing whiplashing mechanism, and it'll cause the same thing. A. B, you don't have to actually be knocked out to get concussion. So once we have those 2 items out of the way.
It's true. He wasn't. He played the rest of the game.
And oddly, and another fact is, some people's symptoms don't show up for 48 hours. Hence why you see on TV, you assume somebody should have had a concussion, but they're still back in the game, and then they miss a week later. What they should do in the meantime is, the biggest thing, you want to get followed up with a physician. And there's lots of resources for physicians that they have in their arsenal to be able to help with both the return to play and return to learn. From the return to learn aspect, and if anybody wants more information about this, a really good website is called parachute.ca in the concussion section. They literally have the notes that you can actually print off as teachers to give to students, as students to give to teachers, that they followed up with a physician, where they are in their progress, etc. The biggest thing is to come up with a stage plan with somebody at their school, either their teacher or guidance counselor, depending on the size of the school. It tends to be a teacher, to go over how you're going to gradually increase back into the full learning environment. And that usually is a staged process where you try a few things. You maybe go to one class, or maybe you do a couple classes, or maybe you allow for a half day and then they take a moment by themselves for one period and then continue on. But the basic premise is that somebody's monitoring that and that there's progress being made. In that, you also don't want to keep missing the same class, for example, just because you don't like it or whatever. No, you want to have a variety of learning. People don't maybe underestimate the fact that when you learn and when you think, you actually are doing a physiological process, and that's the process that's being altered during the concussion. No different than if you raised your heart rate or muscle tension or whatever in a return to play environment. Your thinking also has to have a chance to rest. Understanding that there could be irritability, understanding that there could be difference in emotions, different mood, understanding that some days will be better than others. But the good news is 80% of these things resolve between 5 and 7 days. It's the 20% that aren't in that 5 to 7 days that are always a concern. But seeking somebody to help with that gradual return to slowly reintroduce into learning is important. And on another aspect, there's going to be altercations in 3 different realms. There's going to be the pedagogy. Most teachers will do things like, oh, but let's use a computer monitor or a tablet. Some of those things are actually problematic. So those things got to be assessed and understood. There's the psychology of, am I ever going to get better? Or if I can't play or I can't do these things anymore, is that going to be an issue? Then there's also the physiological. The physiological aspect can always be brought in after. We all have to learn. We all have to have a career. We all have to provide for our families or what have you in our lives. Why we're in our current positions now, to give back. So it's important to make sure that those 3 realms are also added into that gradual return. And like I said, hopefully we're in that 5 to 7 day realm and things progress. I don't know if you can add anything to that from a teaching standpoint.
Yeah, and I think like the stamina is a slow increase in stamina as to how much a student can handle. And I think in that, when you even just talk about within a learning environment, there's so many other factors that contribute to one that's positive. And that's a big part. Again, I'm middle years in high school, is that social status, right? How safe does someone feel to be there as well? And in that, we see some of the effects from COVID, right? We tried online learning and all of that. But when someone is coming back from a concussion, I think that it's also good to carry that information forward, because if they want to go into pre-cal or like grade 9, 10, 11, 12, there might be some little gaps there due to this injury and not due to a lack of trying. So I think even just being compassionate for students and like hearing where they're at and meeting them where they're at, or even decreasing as much anxiety as you can, I think will also help increase the energy that they have to move forward through their day.
That brings me back to your story at the beginning, because you shared about the impact on your identity, because you were a hockey player. That was who you were. And then you're dealing with the physical issues, and you're dealing with the emotional issues and the social issues. And so I think what you're saying about teachers having empathy and compassion during the process is really important, because it's not just the specific content of one class that they're struggling with. There's all these this web of other issues that can be impacting, right?
Absolutely, and patience. So I think that athletes too, the student could be an athlete, or maybe they're not an athlete, right? Something else could have happened, but they want to get better too, right? They're not enjoying this whole process either. There's a factor of they're frustrated and they're annoyed, and then there might be some irritation at home and some backlash. And so I think it's also just really important for teachers and parents to remind students and kids and teens, and I guess even adults, that this takes time and that it's okay that it takes time. And I think that just knowing that you're okay with where you're at right now and that you're here, you have that support, that's a huge effect in healing.
So then building just the awareness becomes a huge piece for parents and for teachers both, right? So what about, we were just talking about what parents should know. What about for Michelle, who has younger children who are just starting to get into organized sport?
We were just last night, my daughter's in grade 7. She was playing against grade 9 kids at Crocus. Grade 9 basketball is scrappy, right? So there were kids on the ground, kids piling on top of each other. Like, it was messy. But I was thinking about that as we were heading into this conversation. I need to inform myself. So it's good timing for me too. Yeah.
The main thing is to not be fearful. These things have been happening for a long period of time. And I think there's way more information available for teachers and parents to understand. And it's available, like I said, there'll be attachments to this and other resources available to understand what to do and what not to do. I think one of the reasons why there's been such a rise in the profile of concussion and returning to sport and returning to learn is the fact that more are being reported now. And a long time ago, people just thought this was a normal process. And I think with awareness comes obviously higher numbers, but with higher numbers comes more resources of human resources available to help alleviate and navigate through some of the troubling times. But oddly enough, that is only going to be the 20% that are going to be longer than 2 weeks. 7 days plus the return to learn. Usually within 2 weeks, everything is fine. And I find that here, even at BU. We rarely have a really problematic case. But when we do, we just work it through just like anything else, any other injury.
I think that's I think that's a really nice place to wrap up. It's a hopeful place to end and a bit reassuring maybe
Well,
for people who are listening.
Sometimes it can be scary, like I said, especially younger people. The younger parents are like, what are we going to do?
Yeah, that's what I was
Yeah.
thinking back in my mind.
we don't want to stop kids from playing, right?
No, and I think the thing is too, like I even look back at my last concussion that I thought I made it
The
through,
heart.
and it's that
so
semifinal in
yeah.
the last, like, I think it was overtime or whatever, and it was the last like minute. But I remember Shad was there, and I remember just like laying on my back on the field. I'm like, as if I went so long without this, and I remember telling Shad, I think I'm okay. Like I'm okay. And I remember Shad saying, just take a run. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not okay. But even with that, to have Shad just listening and meeting me where I was at in that moment. And I think that as you get older too, and I think I'm a big supporter of kids playing multiple sports. Because if there's something that happens in one, you have some options, but also to know that you're worth more than just that sport, or you're worth more than something else. And there's a bigger picture. Where you kept saying too, it's the bigger picture, Bailey.
Yeah. You're
And
not
it
gonna
was
be- you're not
like,
gonna
yeah,
make very much money playing the sport.
you're
That's exactly what I
right.
said.
Yeah,
But
that's
you're gonna have a
exact-
career one day.
That's exactly
Usually
it.
what I say.
So then go for a run though. And so it was like made it to half and that was it. So I think just even being able for me to put in perspective and then have someone, my parents were incredible through the whole process. They had a lot of tears on the phone. And I think that them valuing me for more than just an athlete and supporting me no matter what. And then even, again, having Shad be like, yeah, no, there's beyond this, that you can sit back and go, okay, what is this really worth? What do I really want here? And that recovery was actually, I felt better much quicker because there was such a time frame between
And your
other
mindset
events.
was in the proper place.
It was in the
Yeah.
proper,
Not at the end
exactly.
of the world, but it was close. You could hear the water running over.
Exactly. Yeah. So I took some time and it's, again, I feel great. And I think our bodies are more resilient too if we treat them well than I think some people give them credit. Right? But, yeah.
Thanks for coming to
Yeah,
talk with us
thanks
about
for
it.
sharing. Thanks for sharing your
It's good
story too. It's
information.
personal.
Thanks for
Appreciate
inviting
it.
me. Thanks, Chef. Let me tag along.
Yeah. It was fun. Let's do it again.
Yeah, thanks everybody.